I parked my 2012 Honda Accord between a black Porsche Cayenne and a pearl white Tesla Model S. Their doors clicked shut with practiced arrogance. Mine closed without a sound. Just like me. It had been 9 years since I last stepped into the Alden family estate. 9 years since I walked out without making a scene, without a single raised voice. Back then, I had nothing except an idea, a laptop, and a wristwatch I still wore to this day. Tonight, I was 34. I wore a navy dress I'd pulled from the back of my Seattle closet. No labels, no designer. Just clean lines and quiet dignity. I'd come alone. No date, no entourage. Just me. Just Sabrina. The front door was already open. Through the marble entryway, I could hear the laughter, sharp, polished, expensive. I stepped inside. The chandelier above the dining room still cast that same golden glow across the long oak table. 16 chairs, crystal, silver, the scent of veal and wine. Nothing had changed except me. Sylvia Alden, my mother, was at the head of the table, just as always. Elegant, impeccable, cold. She turned her head slowly when she saw me. Then she smiled, but it was the kind of smile that held no warmth. Just warning. Well, she said, raising her voice just enough for the help to hear. The prodigal disappointment arrives. There was a pause. Then a few chuckles. From my brother Malcolm, the corporate lawyer with the perfect tie and the sharper tongue. From cousin Ethan, Wall Street's favorite loudmouth. From Lydia, Malcolm's wife, who once told me success was just a matter of marrying well. I stood there, hands at my side. And then it came. "You're an embarrassment to this family," my mother said, clear, cold, and loud. No one gasped. They just nodded silently or looked away. I didn't answer. I didn't flinch. I just walked forward and took the last empty seat between a chair no one wanted and a silver platter no one offered me. Across the table, Malcolm raised his glass. "To high standards," he said, grinning. I didn't lift mine, and no one noticed. Or maybe they did, and that was the point. I glanced down at my wristwatch. Still ticking. Still mine. And I wondered for the first time in a long time. There's a photograph somewhere in this house. It was taken on the day of Malcolm's graduation from Yale. The whole family was there, lined up on the front lawn in pastel and pearls, holding champagne flutes and talking about legacy. I stood at the edge of the frame, not quite centered, not quite welcome. I was 22. At the time, I'd just finished my degree in computer science from NYU, not Ivy League, not celebrated. I'd been offered a junior data position at a defense subcontractor. I'd told them during brunch. Sylvia, my mother, blinked once and then said, "That's niche." My father, Leonard, didn't even look up from his phone. "You know, Sabrina, we could still make some calls. Georgetown Law's summer intake isn't full yet." I remember nodding politely and folding my napkin slowly. The next day, I left. No fight, no tears, just absence. I didn't slam any doors. I didn't say goodbye. I packed my 2 suitcases and caught a Greyhound bus out of Stamford Station with a one-way ticket to Brooklyn and a dream no one believed in. That was the beginning of Arcadia. It started in a sublet apartment with bad plumbing and better coffee. I coded on a refurbished MacBook. I pitched to blank Zoom screens. I got told no 57 times before one woman, an ex-NSA analyst turned angel investor, saw something in me that no one in my own family ever had. She gave me $200,000 and a wristwatch, a plain leather-banded analog. She said, "You'll need something to measure time, not just hours, milestones." I wore it every day since. When I landed our first Department of Defense contract, I sent my parents a letter. Not for approval, just to tell them. Sylvia replied 3 weeks later. Typed. Signed. Short. "Don't put the Alden name on anything that might not last. No congratulations. No call." I kept the letter. I framed it. Every time a deal collapsed, I looked at it. Every time a door shut, I read it again. And every time Arcadia rose first to $10 million, then to $100 million, then to $2 billion, I read that letter like a compass. Not to guide me toward them, but to remind me how far I'd already gone. I didn't return to Connecticut, not for birthdays, not for funerals, not when Lydia gave birth to twins, not even when Father had his mild stroke and Malcolm gave a speech about family unity. They never invited me, and I never asked, until now. Now, sitting at their table between their smirks and their silverware, I looked across the faces that once told me I'd fail, and I remembered. I wasn't here for them. I was here for something else, something quieter, but heavier, something like closure. Dinner was veal. It always was. Veal with wild mushroom risotto plated on bone-white china rimmed in gold, the same set Sylvia had flown in from Milan the year I turned 17. I remember because that was also the year she forgot my birthday. I hadn't eaten veal in years. I picked at it in silence. Malcolm was, of course, mid-story, something about arbitration almost collapsing before he saved the deal. He held his fork like a gavel and his ego like a badge. Lydia, his wife, followed up with her usual timing. Youngest partner in firm history. The pride in her voice had its own chandelier. Across the table, Cousin Ethan was speaking louder than necessary, explaining to no one in particular why his portfolio manager was wrong about emerging markets. He gestured with his wine glass like he was conducting an orchestra only he could hear. Sylvia sat at the head of the table, nodding, smiling, guiding the rhythm. Like always. When she finally turned to me, she gave a thin smile and said, "Still working? In technology, dear, not tech. Not cybersecurity, not even your company, just working." I nodded, still building systems. That was apparently enough to invite more interest. Ethan leaned across the table and asked what kind apps, websites, the crypto stuff. I could have told them that Arcadia's infrastructure handled 15% of the federal government's secure cloud traffic. I didn't. Before I could answer, Malcolm jumped in reminding everyone how I used to stay up all night in front of a Dell desktop as a kid. Sylvia added, "We thought it was a phase." Lydia chimed in next, still sawing at her veal. She asked if I had a team now or was I still doing it all solo. Arcadia had 200 employees and a new office in Tokyo. We were preparing a bid for NATO, but I kept it simple. No, I have help. Malcolm's smirk curled. Eventually, everyone needs a real career. The laughter that followed was soft, polished, surgical. Sylvia stepped in, her voice dipped in diplomacy. Sabrina's always carved her own path. That word again. Different. Outlier. Other. Not one of us. Malcolm raised his glass with mock warmth. To the rebels in the family, may they find their way back before it's too late. I didn't lift mine. Instead, I looked down at my watch. Still ticking. Still mine. Ethan, ever opportunistic, leaned in again. He said his firm was getting serious about investing in startups and that I could pitch something if I wanted. "Happy to give your little project a shot," he said with a wink. Little project? I met his eyes and said simply, "It's not little." He laughed. "Oh yeah, then why haven't we heard of it?" I let a pause stretch. Then answered quietly, "Maybe you weren't listening." The table stilled. Lydia let out a sharp, surprised laugh. "She's got a bite," Sylvia chuckled, reaching to top off someone's wine. "We're just teasing, darling. It's all in good fun." But it wasn't. Not for me. It never had been. They just never noticed. Dessert was served fig tartlets with lavender, honey, and creme fraiche. I didn't touch mine. Malcolm was midway through a story about depositions in Miami when a soft knock echoed from the entryway. A moment later, Jillian, my assistant, appeared in the dining room. She never wore black unless I asked her to. Tonight, she wore black. She approached with steady steps, ignoring the startled glances, and leaned down beside me. "I'm sorry to interrupt, Ms. Alden," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper, "but the jet is ready. The pilot's requesting final confirmation for Tokyo. They'll need to file the flight path within the hour." The fork slipped from Lydia's hand. It clattered onto her china plate with a dull ring. I didn't flinch. "Thank you," I said, reaching for my cloth napkin. "Tell Captain Reyes we'll proceed as scheduled. Stop over in San Francisco for the board vote. I'll join the call en route." Jillian nodded once turned and left as quietly as she had come. Silence. Not awkward silence. Not confused silence. Dead silence. the kind that settles like dust after something breaks. Ethan blinked slowly. Malcolm's jaw twitched. Sylvia sat straighter as if posture could anchor her to a reality that was slipping fast. "Jet," Malcolm said finally. I dabbed the corner of my mouth with the napkin. Gulfstream. We use it for intercontinental meetings. Arcadia closed a Tokyo partnership last quarter. Arcadia, Ethan echoed. "My company," I said simply. Sylvia narrowed her eyes. "You have a jet?" "I have a company," I corrected. "The jet is just efficient." Malcolm tried to laugh, but it came out as a choked sound. "So what are you saying, that you're running some kind of real operation?" I reached into my bag, pulled out my phone, and opened the Bloomberg app. "Here," I said, sliding it across the table. Headline: Arcadia Cloud secures $900 billion defense infrastructure contract with Department of Homeland Security. My photo taken during our press conference in D.C. was featured beneath it. Ethan leaned forward. "That's you?" I nodded. No flourish, no explanation. Sylvia reached for the phone but didn't touch it. I watched her hands tremble just slightly. "Why didn't you tell us?" she asked, voice thin. Would it have mattered, I asked. The room stayed still. No one reached for their tartlets. Even the air seemed to hesitate. I looked down at my watch, still ticking. Still mine. Malcolm was the first to speak, or rather to challenge. His voice had that familiar edge, the one he used in court when cornered. He pointed stiffly at my phone and said the article could be exaggerated. I looked at him, tilted my head. "You think Bloomberg inflates federal defense contracts?" He didn't answer, just looked away. Across the table, Ethan was still reading, his lips moving, as he took in each headline like they might change if he stared long enough. I watched his face shift as the numbers landed. Arcadia's global footprint. Our contract values the recent valuation. $5.8 billion, he murmured, like the words burned going down. "No," I said gently. "We crossed 6 last month." Lydia's hand trembled as she reached for her wine. She missed the glass. Sylvia still hadn't spoken. She was sitting straighter now, like posture might anchor her to some version of control. Her eyes stayed fixed on the table, on the space where my phone had rested. Then she asked very softly, "You built this alone?" "Not alone," I replied. "Just not with any of you." Malcolm gave a dry laugh, forced and brittle. He said something about family, about how I should have told them, that we could have helped, that we were blood. But I remembered too well the meeting he'd had with Father when I was 25, the one where he called me a liability and advised they keep my name off the Christmas newsletter. I didn't raise my voice. I just told him, "You thought I was bad for the Alden brand." I listened. Sylvia finally looked up. Families say things they don't mean. I took a folded piece of paper from my wallet, creased but carefully kept. I slid it across the table toward her. Her letter from 3 years ago. Typed, signed, cold. "You told me not to put the Alden name on anything that might not last." She didn't touch it, just stared. Ethan leaned in, suddenly eager. He talked about how his firm was exploring tech, mentioned possible collaboration, networks, capital. I let him finish. Then said simply, "We're not raising." Lydia jumped in next, trying to soften things. She said if they'd known, maybe things would have been different. Maybe they would have supported me. I looked at her. Not angry, just tired. They were different, I said, just not for me. Sylvia finally reached toward the letter but stopped halfway, her hand hovering. I watched her hesitate, not because of what I'd become, but because touching that letter meant admitting she'd written it. My phone buzzed in my bag. Jillian, on time. I stood, folded my napkin, and placed it beside the untouched dessert. "I have a board vote in 6 hours. We're bidding for a NATO contract." I turned to leave. Sylvia's voice caught in the air. "Why tonight, Sabrina? Why come at all?" I paused at the doorway, my back still to them. Then I said, to see if anything had changed. I turned to face them one last time. It hasn't. I stepped into the hallway. Behind me, the dining room held its breath like a stage after the curtains dropped, but the actors still don't know what to do. Then the scramble began. Malcolm was first, always the quickest to pivot. "Sabrina, wait. Maybe we should talk investments. If Arcadia is expanding, there could be alignment." "Strategic partnership." I turned halfway, just enough for him to see my face. "You mean now that you believe I exist?" He said nothing. Ethan followed. "Hey, listen, I've always believed in you. I mean, I knew you were smart. I just didn't realize—" He trailed off. "You didn't realize I stopped needing your approval years ago. I finished for him." Lydia offered a small smile, polished and practiced. "If you're ever hiring, I've actually been exploring tech-adjacent fields." I looked at her for a moment. She used to laugh when I tried to explain what I did. She once told a family friend I worked with screens. "Can you name one programming language?" I asked. Her mouth opened, then closed. She looked away. And then, at last, Sylvia rose from her chair. She walked toward me slowly, each step more about control than grace. "You're angry," she said. "I understand. But don't let pride close doors that family can help keep open." That word again. Family. "You had 9 years to open a door," I said. "You chose to paint it shut." Sylvia's voice softened, almost maternal. "You're still in Alden. That means something." "It means everything to you," I said, "and nothing to the world I built." She flinched, just slightly, but I saw it. She reached out to touch my arm, maybe, to pull me back in by instinct. I stepped away. "Don't," I said. "This isn't a fight. This is a line." My phone buzzed again. Jillian. Time. I pulled on my coat. No rush, no drama. Just finality. As I reached the front door, I turned one last time, not to them, but to the house, to its stillness, its weight. "You always thought I left because I failed," I said. "But I left because I finally understood I didn't need to pass your tests. I made my own rules." Then I opened the door. Outside, the car waited engine quiet driver already standing beside it. The air was cold, but for the first time in years, it didn't reach me. The wind caught the edge of my coat as I stepped outside. The car was already warm. The driver nodded, took my bag without a word. Jillian had chosen him well, efficient, invisible, precise. Behind me, I could hear the front door creak slightly. It didn't close. They were still watching. Of course they were. Families like mine only know how to chase what they've already lost. I slid into the back seat. Leather. Quiet. Familiar. As the car pulled away from the Alden estate, I didn't look back. Not once. Not at the columns. Not at the windows. Not at the people who once measured my worth by where I sat at a dinner table, what dress I wore, or what car I drove. The silence inside the car was different from the one I'd left behind. This silence wasn't tense. It was earned. I looked down at my wristwatch. The minute hand clicked forward, still ticking, still mine. The next morning, the messages started. A LinkedIn request from Lydia. A voicemail from Malcolm. "We should reconnect. Family synergy has value." A long, overwritten email from Ethan about collaborative innovation. And from Sylvia, a handwritten note delivered by courier. Pressed paper. Gilt edging. "We should rebuild. You've made us proud." I didn't reply. Instead, I forwarded every message to Jillian with a 2-word instruction block list. That evening, a delivery arrived at the Alden estate. A single box. No card. Inside it, the letter Sylvia once sent me folded beside a photo of their dinner table taken from outside the window. My seat. Empty. The note read only, "I was there. You just didn't see me." Some of us were never really invited to the table, but we still remember who looked away. You don't have to explain. Just leave one word they never said to you.